10 seconds early? We never start early. Amazing. It's Monday after Rogue, 2025. We got Patrick still over in Aberdeen. Then chumming it up with everybody on site there, and also getting some pretty good interviews and pictures alongside Marius and Renato. Look like you guys have had a pretty good weekend. We'll hear about that in a second. Wes and I are in the US, and we're grateful to have Wes join us again for a variety of different reasons. We did not do a preview show, which we had talked about having you on for. But here we are doing the review show. And I think, first and foremost, we'll start maybe a little bit more general, because obviously for people like us that weren't there, the only way to consume it is through the broadcast. So Wes, how'd you spend your weekend, and what was your overall perspective in terms of trying to take into action through the pretty robust broadcast that Rogue offers?
The broadcast is awesome. I think they do such a good job. I don't think I can think of, even from the games broadcast, WFP, like even some events that most people would consider larger events, I don't think there's a better broadcast. Rogue just does such a good job. And obviously they're covering a little bit less, with 20 male athletes, 20 female athletes, and the strongmen, strongwomen. But I think they do such a good job with the broadcast. It's very easy to keep up with. Having it on YouTube is obviously awesome. It's very accessible, easy to get to wherever. So I was really, really happy with the broadcast, and it made it easy to go back and watch everything. If you missed an event, I enjoyed it a lot.
Wish Mandando, welcome to the show. 100% agrees with Wes there. Yeah, I would say the same. I know the guys who are responsible, or the main guy who's responsible for that broadcast. I actually, when we did the SoCal broadcast too, and we were out there, we were already talking about it. And I know he's been planning and working on that for a long time, and that he's done it. He's got as much experience or more than anyone as like an executive producer of broadcast in this sport. But the standard is very high with Rogue, but the level of communication ahead of time also makes that doable for them. And he's a guy who's, he's just interested in doing a good job. He doesn't want his name thrown out. He doesn't need any of that. He's got his, his marching orders, and he wants to execute on them. I think at this point, everybody understands that to do a broadcast like that is expensive. But the more that you're given the money to do it, the higher the level of responsibility to actually deliver something that's really, really good. And obviously, as someone who has kind of been in that chair with major broadcasts this year, a couple of different places, I find myself watching from a little bit different perspective. And particularly, I would say the thing that I've learned the most about this year is the graphic side of things. And so I was kind of watching to see, especially compared to last year's Rogue, second year in the same place, what kind of changes to the graphics they made. I thought they had some nice, they're a little bit smaller or not so easy to notice necessarily, but a little bit of a couple added things that I felt like you said really helped with the storytelling. I also think they had a few sort of innovative things on the camera side. It felt to me like they either had a drone in there that they were using and it was moving as they were going, or maybe that they had a camera that was on a wire.
They had a camera on the wire like you would see in the NFL. They had one that went the length of the arena long way, so it would catch start to finish. Really cool. And it was up high enough so it wasn't blocking anyone's view. But yeah, that was really cool. It was kind of neat. Because Brian, as you know, that the P&J Center is really close to the airport, so there's no way they would allow even drones inside to be flown. So some of the footage that you saw is funny on the run on the event 7, what was the name of that one? Granite City. There was actually a guy with the drone that was the camera. They're using the drone.
That's what he was holding. I actually took a screenshot. So he was at basically the turn before they ran down the straightaway to get back in. And there's times he was running with them, and you could see him on camera. I took a screenshot of it and tried to zoom in to see what that was. That was an actual drone that he was just holding.
Yeah, he was holding a drone and just running with them. So up in the media room, we're all joking. It's like, yeah, you see that drone? That was so cool. And then we're like, yeah, he was even making the sounds with his mouth. Like, so yeah, that was an actual. They actually did use a drone for but that's part of that innovation. Like I said, it's like, they had the drone. They weren't allowed to use it, but they had a lot of confidence in the ability for it to. If you ever seen a drone, it has self-stabilization. So if you're going to run with that thing and don't want a big giant like rig, it's just a handheld thing. So it was kind of neat. So again, that innovation, and it worked.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, I want to just tip my hat to the guys that are involved with that. From the consumer perspective, someone who's trying to watch it without. I didn't watch any of the extra stuff that was there, just the raw broadcast footage. I thought it was very good. I could probably count on my hand like 2 or 3 times during the weekend where I felt like they maybe missed an athlete that they should have had a little more coverage on before they finished. But if you're talking about 3 days of coverage, and I'm looking for, like, it's very, very minor stuff, but there's area for improvement. So I feel like I agree with Wes, this broadcast is right up there at the top of broadcasts that have ever existed in competitive fitness. I think next kind of, go ahead.
I didn't watch too much of the broadcast, but you could see some of it here and there. I think the one good thing I did take, and obviously you guys can give your opinion on this, but I thought when they went to the duel and they had the graphics overlay for that with the bracket, and I thought that was really cool how they integrated that in there, and it was really like March Madness-esque, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah, and that's where the comments are coming in. We got Kate here; she enjoyed watching from home as well. And yeah, those wire cameras. I just want to say one more thing. Like, I think something that people have been asking for, or I've heard people asking for, is more wide shots. And that kind of mobile camera with a wide view allows for a different aspect of storytelling than we've really ever seen before. Usually, the wide shots are much more static. So that was, I thought that was really cool. And they were the director. I don't know actually who the director is for that, but he was cutting sometimes between these like cinematic wide shots and these really dynamic close-ups of athletes. So I thought the balance there for a fitness competition was also about as good as I've ever seen. So hats off to the broadcast team. Obviously, we should not be remiss to say that, like, what Sean Woodland's doing over those days. First of all, if you're a person who speaks a lot on a public platform, you're always going to say something wrong. You're always going to say something silly. Like we got to get over that at some point. So I'm sure he had a few faux pas here and there, but he was basically, Adrian Conway mentioned this in his thing. This guy had a live mic for every one of the 4 divisions for 3 consecutive days. It's a lot. You have to manage your voice, your energy levels, 4 different competitions, all those athletes, all the workouts, all the cues that are coming in, all the graphics. Obviously, Sean's a pro, but I thought he carried it very well. And I think him and Adrian have really settled into a good rhythm where, you can, if you listen to the cadence of how they talk, like, Sean doesn't have to ask any questions. He just ends and Adrian picks up, and they just bounce off of each other really, really well. When it gets down to the climactic finishes, Adrian lays out, Sean brings him in. So that's the benefit of having some consistency with the broadcast team, that then those ebbs and flows, those passing off of the kind of torch as they're exchanging things. And Granite City is a good example. That's a longer workout. You're looking at 2 hours, 2 guys to talk for 2 hours about that workout, and they're running, I guess there's 16 total laps of just running in a circle, or actually it's 32. And I never really felt that bored. The conversation was good. They had enough cameras to cover it. So plenty of good stuff to say about the broadcast here. I think the other big topic to just like address early on before we get into some of the results and the athlete breakdowns, things that surprised us, good and bad, is just the totality of the programming. I think a lot of people had conversations about that. Wes, you're a top athlete on the team side of things. You have some friends who competed there. What are your it's always interesting to look ahead of time and think about what I'm expecting, and then look back afterwards and say, well, what actually happened? Looking back on the weekend, what are your takeaways from the programming side of things?
I think it was a good test of overall fitness. I think Rogan in general in the past has had sometimes they've had a little bit of a lean towards a power and a strength bias. I would say in a way that could be almost uneven to like a pure fitness perspective. I think this year they did a great job of blending the two and saying, hey, we still are a competition. We're going to throw you some odd things like a log clean and jerk or a log muscle up. But we're also going to give you guys, make sure that the people that are going to do well in these events are also not only going to be really strong and good at these kind of strongman or odd object implements, but they're also going to be really, really fit. And I think you saw that across the results of the weekend. You saw people that have generally done better at Rogue do a little bit worse because they couldn't rely as much on maybe some power or some strength, and they had to rely more on fitness. I think a good example of that is like the 4 round for time, of the 10 back squat, 10 dumbbell snatch, 10 sandbag clean. It's a good example of, you look at that workout, and I think a lot of people looked at that workout and said, oh, the strongest person is going to do well in this workout. And that generally wasn't the case, right? You had guys that did really well in that workout that would not be the strongest in the field or not be someone that's generally winning a strength event. But they had so much fitness required in that event with, 160 reps. It's 106 or 120 maybe. I think it was 3 or 4 rounds.
4 rounds, 30 rounds per rep. Yeah.
4 rounds. So 120 reps, you have to be fit. You have to be strong, but you have to be really fit to recover between those movements.
I think that probably the best example of this, what you're talking about, is in a person, is Lucy Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you look at Lucy Campbell's year, the only bad finishes she has are on 1 rep max tests. Those, I think that they're like 20% or 30% worse than any finish on any other workout that she's had. And we talked about it, or I talked about it a little bit in my preview with Andrew, is that, she's one of these athletes that you give her an 85% load to cycle and she's going to do it better than anyone. And that's what she did on that workout. She'd get hammered if the workout was just a 1 rep max back squat and she wouldn't make the podium. But you give her 30 at a weight that she can move, she's strong enough to flex that muscular endurance and fitness and like keeping the heart rate elevated while weightlifting over a 12 to 15 minute time domain, or maybe was it about that, better than a lot of the athletes in the field who would beat her on a 1 rep max back squat. So I would say, I know you mentioned some that maybe did a little bit worse, but I would say that her ability to express her strength, James Sprague similarly as well, the muscular endurance is obviously there, even though the top end strength isn't. And that was definitely rewarded this weekend. Aaron Fraser appeared to be a beatdown on CNS and or backs. Patrick, you were on site. You talked to a lot of the athletes. Was there any conversation about this from anyone there, athletes, coaches, whatever, or is this just perception from afar?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's obviously a lot of talk on that. The good thing, especially the first 2 days, is that, at Rogue, there's like 3 hours recovery between events and events. And then obviously you're done. They're getting done roughly, by the time they're finishing eating, most of them are probably going to bed or bedding down by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. And then, the next day, with the exception of getting the athlete brief at 8:30 on Sunday morning, I think, there's plenty of time to recover. And you saw that, especially on Saturday. Vellner's a perfect example. Vellner's one of those guys who, he's a little bit older, takes a little bit longer to recover, but he recovered fine for Saturday. Now, unfortunately, the Saturday going into Sunday, not so well, because Sunday there weren't those long breaks. I think that was a complaint I did hear kind of from a lot of athletes. It's like Sunday was like, it was go, go, go. It's like you finished an event, like, okay, corral in 30 minutes, and you just got done on a 28-minute workout run, rope climb workout, and then you have to go out there and do, what is it, 160 overhead squats and burpees. I mean, how many was it? 8 reps each? 8 rounds, 8 reps each?
8 and 6.
So, yeah, 8 and 6. But I mean, and you're literally turning around doing that, and then again there was no break, and they had to come back and do that. So I don't know. For some reason I think the venue, they had to shut down at a certain time, so they had to get everyone out of there. But and I was talking to some athletes about it. They said if Sunday was the first day, it would have been no issue in terms of having the breaks. But it wore down. It's like you saw athletes, especially at the hotel Friday night, coming in just like, they all wanted a back allergy. It was spinal. It was spinal. It was all spinal. But yeah. But again, it came down to recovery, and the good thing about Rogue is that they have all that stuff available. They had 8 tables in the back where they had, people that could, physios on call. They provided food for the athletes. I mean, everything was there. Obviously you didn't, the venue's connected to the hotel. So athletes could go back, especially Friday and Saturday, take naps or do whatever. But yeah, I mean, but they all expected it. I mean, I look at the 2022 Rogue Invitational. Was that the one with the ranch run
Yeah, I think so.
when they had like 12 work? It was the first. It was the second
It
year
might have
in
been.
Delhi.
I'll check, but go ahead.
But in my opinion, that was probably the hardest, like the hardest programming for athletes that I've ever heard of. Like I've heard athletes say, like, "Oh my God, that was, you know, they were just
Yeah,
done."
that was that one. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, yeah,
that was
because
a
they end up doing
back-to-back
like small
year.
steps. Yeah. So, but I think a lot of those athletes who were there that year, this year supplanted that one as probably the hardest
Oh, wow.
competition that
I want to
and
go. I want to go back to one thing that you said and get Wes's take on this. We talk a lot about broad time and modal domains, and that you want to be excellent in a variety of different time domains if you're going to excel at this sport. Wes, from the athlete's perspective, is it fair to also say that you need to be really good at broad times and modal domains when it comes to recovery, and that it's actually kind of a nuance of programming to have a variety of different windows, whether it's a back-to-back workout, quick ones with 30 minutes overnight, and how you strategize around that? Obviously there's variables with the venue and everything else to consider that help to contribute to the day, but for athletes, knowing how to recover if you're given 1 minute, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 5 hours a day, is that also a skill that you can train?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it comes down to a lot of things, but I think that your ability to adapt to a different amount of time to recover is a huge part of being an athlete. You're going to see that. You see that in all sports, right? You see that in seasons. As seasons progress, a lot of times the window and the turnaround gets shorter. You look at something like the NBA Finals where you're playing 7 games back to back, and they're very intense. And you hear players talking about that and saying, "Oh, the final is the hardest part of the year." The players that make it to that point. I think the same thing is true at an elite level of any sport. You need to be able to recover and turn around quickly.
Yamamoto.
I was about to say World Series.
You got to be able to turn around.
Yeah, and that's baseball, which is you have a lot more players to choose from. But when you play like a 12 inning game at the highest level with through the end of the night, and you use up your whole pitching staff. I mean, but that's a great example.
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of it, and I think what it really does is it forces the athletes to professionalize a lot of things like their nutrition and their recovery. So like if you have an hour to recover between events, then you need to have practiced that. You need to know how to fuel between events. And you look at the top athletes in the sport, people that I get to see train all the time, right? These people are very serious. The best ones are very serious about the way they fuel between sessions and between events. And they're going to, sometimes these athletes are doing 3 or 4 workouts a day and they're spacing them out like they would games events or rogues events or whatever. So I think it does change a lot, but it's fun to see how athletes recover, because you have athletes that are really, really good and are able to perform really well when they do have those longer breaks. And you have athletes that aren't as good when it comes down to that shorter turnaround. You see it a lot, I think, in especially run events. I think that run events, like the one that happened on Sunday, when you have a 30-minute event to start your day, and then you have maybe a 60-minute turnaround to go into another workout, that's hard. That's really hard to recover from. And you're going to see people just be dampened. And I think you saw that with a lot of the athletes in that second event, because if someone was dampened on that event, it was very obvious. They were going a lot slower. Their burpees cadence wasn't quite the same. They didn't look like themselves.
Well, and I actually made this observation that on that day, watching Adler, I think in a vacuum, Adler could have pushed Ricky. Maybe he wouldn't have beat him, but he could have closed that 15-second gap to a couple seconds and raced him. But it wasn't worth it for him. And he even said it in the interview. I got 2 more workouts to go. I know I have to do well in the next one because I'm going to take a hit relative to the big boys on the last one. Ricky wasn't in a position to do that. He was too far behind. He had to make sure he got the win, and he pushed it. Well, he really paid for that on the next one, where he had probably as bad a finish as he's ever going to have on that workout outside of the top 10, and basically took any hopes of that last charge up the leaderboard out. So I think great case study there of what Wes is talking about. But yeah, I mean, look, the volume of work that's required, especially from a weightlifting perspective at Rogue, is no secret. like Patrick said, the athletes know that that's coming when they sign up there. And like Katie said in the interview with Patrick, it is hard. The sport is hard. You know, you're not showing up there and it's like, okay, 10 rope climbs for time, guys, have fun. Like, no, that's not what it's about. And that's what those guys prepare and train for. And even though it, you know, like Aaron said, it absolutely looks like a beatdown, it is definitely taxing on the CNS, backs, posterior chain in general. I mean, think about all the work that was done on Friday and Saturday. And then that morning on Sunday, you got 5K of running. Like the lunging didn't look easy, but it adds up. You got all those 80 overhead squats at 135 immediately after. I mean, but that's why those guys are the best in the world. They're built and trained to do that stuff. So I would say the programming was tough. I mean, I think it was absolutely a difficult test, even as good as those athletes are. I think you could hear that in some of the athletes that are talking, and I think that others felt pretty kind of normal after an elite competition at the end of the weekend. And some of that's going to come down to how much they've competed this year. You know, you look at some of these athletes, and this was, I think, Chandler Smith's third competition. You know, he's did both WFP stops and this. That's a super manageable season. There's other people that are eight legitimate competitions deep at this point in the year, and you're getting to the point where, like, even though you might think you're feeling good, like that stuff adds up. So I think the experience athletes had with the competition is also due to the totality of competition and travel that they've done already this calendar year.
You kind of brought up something. I was just thinking about it. You said like Chandler Smith did 3, and I was just thinking to myself, Brooke Wells, she'll end up doing 8 this year, her final year. And that just kind of dawned upon me. It's like, you know, Brooke is usually one of those athletes that only does like 1 or 2, you know, the games and maybe like Wadapalooza or Rogue, you know, and she hasn't always done Rogue either. I mean, I think she's only done Rogue like twice, to be quite honest, or maybe 3 times. So, you know, Rogue was her 7th event if you count online semifinals. And, you know, this is a person that's retiring at the end of the year, you know, from active competition. I'm like, and this is the best, you know, I know we'll talk about athletes that impressed us, you know, throughout the weekend, but she's one of those athletes that kind of still impresses me. I'm like, this person's retiring. She actually looks like she's probably better than ever. And I think maybe it's because she's not worrying so much about the results that, you know, about the leaderboard and the results. She's out there having fun, and it looks like she's having fun. But Brooke Wells, just thinking about that, it's like 8 competitions that she'll do this year.
Yeah, and she's not the only one. You know, there's a good chunk of athletes that'll be pushing up towards 10 by the time everything's said and done. But yeah, let's go to the athletes. And since you've already brought up Brooke, Patrick, let's just start with the women here. If we have a leaderboard or something to look at, that'd be great. Overall, I felt when I of course I look back to see how the athletes performed compared to my picks, and I think I was extremely good on the women's side with one massive exception, and that's where I would actually like to start, which is Gracie Walton. It was the only athlete that I was at least 10 spots off on the picks. I think I had her 17th. She ended up finishing 7th. And I mean, great last day, huge push and surge up the leaderboard. I didn't see her as having the capacity to finish inside the top 10. But when I was kind of looking back at everything, not just with her, it felt to me like, the proven team in general did fairly well yet again at these competitions. And I'll throw it to you, Wes. I don't know if you saw anything from her in particular or from Proven as a whole that jumped off the page at you.
I think Proven's had a good year. There's no way to, you can't deny that. I think you look at all their athletes and they've had an excellent year. You think about athletes on the male and female side, whether it be Gracie or Jay is another one that come to mind, Maddie Sturt, they're having a good year. And I think that's a testament to what Proven's doing. I think they're doing a really good job. I think Gracie, the thing that stood out to me on Sunday, and I think someone said that, I think it might've been Sean on the broadcast, she smiled for 30 minutes on that first event, smiling the whole time. And it was like outlandish to me. I was like, what are you doing? And she didn't do poorly. She did really well.
I think that's just her thing. I think that's just that's her face. That when she works out, it looks like she's
I don't
smiling.
know, man. I've seen her do other long workouts where it looks like she's
Yeah.
suffering. This was actually, before he even said it, I was watching and I was like, what's going on here? She generally looks like she's just having fun.
Well, you see athletes doing, I think what's funny is you see athletes doing poorly in an event and sometimes they smile because they're like, oh, well, this is another a running event, right? It's a poor event for them. They're running along and they're, smiling at fans and I guess trying to take in the moment. But you don't see a lot of athletes that are crushing an event and doing well that look like they're having a good time. So that was one thing that stood out the most to me about Gracie. And I think the last event, the same thing on the Echo bike, right? It's an event that she won. That's a hard event to look happy on when you're sprinting 50 cals on the Echo.
Yeah, both of the winners looked a little happy during that one. We'll get to the men later on. So anyway, I just want to give a huge shout out to Gracie Walton. I mean, that is the best individual performance of her career up to this point. She's obviously made the games, had a few podiums in Torian, but that's a big deal. She beat some serious athletes there. She made a huge push on the last day. I would say she has, in general, she hasn't done a ton of comps this year. Not being involved in the WFP season, so she's had this break. And she absolutely capitalized on it. So I think that's when you're getting close repetitively to kind of pushing that top 10 and it's not happening, it can start to weigh on you. This, I think, can alleviate some of that stress from her and give her the kind of confidence of like, I can do that. I can be in that final heat. I can have a top 10 finish. That's the first step. That's like Jay Crouch was on the outside of the top 10 for a while. Then he broke through and now he's been able to stay there. So I'm looking forward to see what the confidence that comes out of this performance will do for Gracie going into 2026 and beyond. Leaderboard's right there, Wes. We got the top 6 athletes there. Free reign. Who amongst this group captivated you to the point that you would like to say something about them?
I think 2 really stood out to me as Alex Gazan and Danielle Brandon. I think Danielle Brandon goes into Rogue every year and people, I think, assume she's not going to do super well. They know it's an event that favors a stronger, more powerful athlete. And I think that she showed up and proved some people wrong. I think it's really impressive. And she did still have poor finishes on her, bigger strength events, which is something I know that she's working on. I know she's hammering. But she showed up and she capitalized on the events. I look at like event 1. She capitalized on that event and absolutely blew the field out of the water to show that, hey, I might not do well on this next event, but I'm going to make sure I do as well as I can on these other events so that at the end of the weekend, I'm sitting in a good spot. And Alex Gazan coming back, I think there were a lot of questions about how she was going to be. Every athlete coming back from a significant injury, there's going to be a lot of questions. And she had already withdrawn from the games, already withdrawn from WFP. So I think there were a lot of questions. Okay, well, is she withdrawing because she's still not better, still not healthy, or is she withdrawing for the sake of saving the rest of her year? And I think that she showed up and reminded us all who she is, and she finally got her bench press.
Yeah, no, seriously. And I mean, look, prior to that car accident, there were just after NorCal, a lot of people were talking about her potential at the games. Is this the year she can challenge Tia, get on the podium, make a breakthrough in that regard? So now we've got these two really, I would say, 2 standout performances from her: winning at WFP, all the things that happened over the summer, coming back and taking a pretty commanding second place finish here. I mean, she was nowhere near Laura, who we'll talk about in a second, but a 50-point buffer over women who have made significant performance after significant performance this year in Lucy Campbell, Emma Lawson, Olivia Kerstetter. Melanie says Alex is coming next year. Patrick, I'll throw it to you, someone who's watched her entire career. What do you think the top end potential is for Alex over the next 12 to 18 months?
I mean, I was gonna say like her confidence is like a major thing, and I think especially coming to this competition, I think she took care of that. She obviously was confident, especially in her performance. And I think it'll be fun to see what she does. I mean, I don't know. She's going to take some time off, obviously, and then it's WFP is next on her board, and then it looks like there's a pretty decent off season until the Open starts, and then obviously WFP season for 2026. But I mean, a lot of people would say it. I mean, if you look at the program from games this past year, a lot of people thought that she might have been a really someone that would have gave Tia maybe a little bit more run for her money. I mean, a lot of those events would have been, great on paper for Alex. So I think, her hearing that and seeing that and having a little bit of doubt on where she's at in her fitness, especially coming off those injuries, just puts a whole to rest, especially coming into this field with this type of programming. She does have, a lot of home runs, and it looks like she's showing up a lot of those things. And I don't think she's 100% yet. There are some workouts that she was maybe struggling a little bit. And I think might be maybe some conditioning pieces to that. But I think especially after that weekend that she spent up in Vermont with Frazier and working on some mindset stuff, the team with her with Kotler, I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing some people going to Las Vegas and wanting to train with her more often. And I think she'll be more than happy to take those people too. So I think it just goes up from here. I mean, what we're expecting from Alex is, it was just a small little 6-month blip or 5-month blip, and she's going to be back in the thick of things for podiums and possibly, challenging Tia or Laura, depending on what either one of them does this season.
Sure.
For that top spot.
Yeah, and I'm going to use Lucy Campbell as an example to kind of talk about how some kind of nuanced, impressive thing for Alex Kazan. So for Lucy Campbell, a year ago, she came back to competition. She won in Marbella. She went to Wadapalooza, first place, third place in the Open, first place at Wadland Fest, fourth place at WFP1, second at the Games, fifth at WFP2, third at Rogue Invitational. During the totality of that year, where she's had nothing worse than fifth place finishes at 8 serious competitions, there's only 2 athletes that she hasn't beaten in competition, in live competition, which is Tia Claire Tui and Alex Kazan. So if you're talking about at the top of the sport right now, we know what Tia is when she shows up. We know what Laura is when she shows up. We don't know where Gabby would necessarily fit in if she comes back. I think Amy Kringle's still not quite in that group, but after those top 2, I think that you're looking at Alex Kazan and then Lucy Campbell as the ones that you absolutely, if anyone else wants to make a podium, they cannot look past those two women right now. So, incredible job for Lucy. I mean, I think when I think about the whole year for her, I just think that there's no better slogan. Patrick, you and I were talking about brands for athletes, like find a way. That's who she is. And her story prior to competing is one thing. She's adding to that in competition. The amount of things that she overcame. I mean, she was pretty transparent with her training, like log clean and jerk did not go well in practice. Log muscle up, not go well in practice. Whereas on a pegboard, no opportunity to practice that. Didn't know if she'd finish a couple of the workouts, even though she's coming in 10th. She's celebrating as if she's won because she has won. She's won relative to what she thought might be possible for her. And I think that, every once in a while, you just get these athletes that come along in sport, and maybe they're not the best. She hasn't necessarily won any of the biggest competitions yet. She's knocking on the door. But she's an athlete that I think that people everywhere can't help but be inspired by. And it's just been such a privilege to be able to watch her this year. And I'm really glad that she's able to get back into the competition and do that. Wes, couple other athletes in the top 10 there. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about Laura before we go too much further. I mean, now we've had 7 Rogue Invitationals. Tia's won 4 of them. Laura won 3, has won 3. I didn't add up all the totality of her event wins and whatever, but it's ridiculous. I mean, and all top 7 place finishes there, and her lowest finish did not come on the strict handstand push-up workout, which I think Andrew told me during the weekend was actually a deadlift workout at the end of the day. This is kind of when Laura's doing this, like, how do you beat her?
You can't beat you look at the 2 athletes at the top of the leaderboard, right? In Alex and Laura, not a single finish outside. Well, Alex has won 11th, right? But other than that, not a single finish outside the top 10. And the answer is you don't beat it unless you're that consistent. You don't beat it. You look at even an athlete like Jason. Jason just came off winning the games. He won the games. He had a 19th place finish on the pegboard event. and that took him out of podium contention. It's the same thing with both of these athletes at the top of the leaderboard. You can't beat these athletes unless you're just that consistent. I think you see that across the weekend with Alex and Laura, and I think you also see it on the men's side. People that are trying to claw back from these deficits of getting a 15th, they're getting a 20th, and it's hard. It's really, really hard to come back from that. So I think consistency is the answer. You can't have holes. You can't have holes and be a podium contender anymore.
And whether it's good or a bad thing is irrelevant, but the nature of Rogue's programming is that there are very specific work, like movements or demands that yield good results in workouts. On the first workout, with all the things that there was to do, if you couldn't handle the log muscle up, even though this is the 4th year of it, it didn't matter how good you were at anything else. If you couldn't do the horizontal pegboard, it didn't matter if you could bench press. If you couldn't deadlift the last bar, it didn't matter if you had the handstand push-ups. If you couldn't run, you weren't going to do good on event number 7. And you guys could look at all the workouts and identify what those very specific things are. That's what the article that I wrote 2 weeks ago was all about, is that you have to, and you're talking about an athlete who checked every box this weekend. And every single year, with the exception of the strict handstand push-ups, she does this at Rogue. So yeah, Wes is exactly right. She's got this total package of fitness and the ability to, like, I don't know if it's the perfect storm of the things that Rogue's laying out, but it's hard to say that it is when it's happening every year. She's just, whether it's kind of an isolated thing or even a balanced workout, a more balanced workout, like that's just capacity, like the overhead squats and the burpees. She's taken a 4th on that. That's, you look at other, you look at men that are a similar size to her relative to the field, like Jason. He's the biggest guy, and he's nowhere close on the pace on that workout. Laura doesn't have that problem.
Absolutely.
I think Laura's also the answer to that trivia question that who else is smiling during an event. Laura was smiling from finish to start on the pegboard event, and and the crowd ate it up. Just from the start, she knew that was hers, and it was just cool to see. And she just seems a lot more comfortable. I think this year I don't know, maybe it's because she was chasing Tia or having Tia in the field, but last year she almost had like a chip on her shoulder. This year she didn't have that. She was very thankful to Bill and Katie, obviously, but the crowd, the volunteers. I mean, she was always making a point in talking about the locker room or the women out of back. It seems like she's almost stepping into just maybe this leadership role, as one of the athletes in the back. I know a lot of people think she's kind of like all alone, and she does kind of carry that stuff herself that way. But I think when she's in that back area or after an event, I think one of the best interactions, I think her and Danny were, right before the duel, they're in the tunnel, and they're both laughing and having fun in the tunnel before they went out there. I thought that was really cool. It's really cool to see that.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you a little bit of follow-up. It seemed like the crowd was completely captivated by what was happening on the competition floor. I mean, you mentioned it in the case of Laura, but it seemed like heat after heat, there was an athlete, typically the athlete that was winning the heat, or maybe one towards the back, and the crowd felt like they were right there with them. You and I have obviously spent a lot of time in Europe. It's always interesting, like year 1, the excitement's at an absolute high. In some ways, I feel like year 2 was even like the European crowd that showed up to attend this was even more engaged and more excited to watch these athletes do these workouts. Is that a perception that was echoed on site?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with Lucy and Harry Lightfoot, and even Chandler Smith, who is now kind of, he's living in the UK.
Honorary UK.
An honor, yeah, and I think that helped it. From the first event when Harry was out there, everyone's like, both Harry and Lucy were in that first heat. So it was almost kind of like, that it was kind of getting the fans, that first heat was warming everyone up for the second heats. And people recognized it, and Harry recognized it. I mean, that first heat, poor Harry, it's like he was going hot every freaking event, it seemed like, and the crowd was loving it. And then, a couple of those days he burned dramatically, but he was still having fun. And I think that helped it. And I also think, what also really kept it is Joshie and Stella. Our MCs normally don't get that much credit, but they did a great job of telling the story on the floor, for the crowd. And I thought that was great. I mean, it was almost like live play-by-play. But and we both know Josh and Stella very well. They're very knowledgeable of the athletes and the event, and that's the reason why they got picked for. And then Zach on the Zach, the DJ, did a good job of keeping the crowd. And then Lauren did a great job between the breaks and action. They had these vignettes that they showed between the events that were really cool. Little videos that kept people involved. I mean, it's a lot of cool stuff. They had the legends there who would go around throwing out merch and having fun with it. And, and then they had meet and greets. I mean, again, like it's an experience that you don't often see at sporting events in our space. And Rogue they've solved it. And it's a great thing. And I think that's what helps to keeps the crowd in that moment, because it's hard sometimes with some of these workouts. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, but the final workout, I was kind of bored because 50 cals on the echo bike, it's kind of, I mean, just watching someone on an echo bike for 3 minutes, personally, I wish it was a little bit more of a sprint or the back squat workout. It got kind of a little bit boring, but again, that's when those elements came in. And some of those races were determined after a certain amount of rounds or a certain amount of reps. But I think it's those elements that keep the crowd engaged. And I think it's because that crowd, you don't get that many opportunities to see athletes at this level competing at that high level across the pond.
Wes, we got a little kind of programming question here. Thoughts on the handstand push-up without a deficit? From my perspective, strict or deficit handstand push-ups have been kind of a staple of Rogue's programming. There seems to always be one workout that you have to have that skill to do well on. This year, we just had wall-facing handstand push-ups. Last year, there was with a wall walk or wall walk complex into a handstand push-up. From my perspective, these looked like the least important handstand push-ups in the history of Rogue, and also like the athletes were pretty much just crushing this. Like, it wasn't really much of an issue. As an athlete watching that workout and considering what I just said, what's your perspective on that?
Like you said, I think it comes down to what the crux of the workout is. And I think when you were talking to Andrew about this, he said that the crux of the workout was not the handstand push, it was the deadlifts. And I 100% agree with that. So every workout's going to have a limiter in it, and everyone's going to have a limiter in a specific workout. And I think that deficit handstand push-ups are a good way to decrease the volume and increase the amount of strength, right? Or the efficiency capacity required to test something. I don't think there was enough pressing volume. You see it with Laura. Everyone is very apparent that Laura has a hole in a strict overhead pressing department. With that, there wasn't enough volume to stop her up. And you see that in a lot of competitions where you have athletes that are very good at something. They don't really get to shine as much. And the athletes that aren't as good at something don't get punished as much because there's not enough volume. And it's not the crux of the workout. So I think that a deficit on this workout, I think would have definitely tipped the scales more towards a handstand push-up workout. At the end of the day, I think your strongest deadlifters are going to win because most people don't have a significant enough hole in the handstand push-up. But if you make it a deficit, I think that it definitely, like I said, tips the scales in a more balanced direction.
Update on Laura: she wins about 1 out of every 4 workouts at Rogue. So that's a pretty good standard to set. Other athletes in the top here that we haven't mentioned is really just Emma Lawson and Olivia Kerstetter. I would say, Emma Lawson was right there knocking on a podium, which she's done multiple times at Rogue. The big difference I noticed from her, even a couple months later compared to WFP, is that her pulling strength from the floor looks to be much more confident, or maybe she's getting some more of that strength back. I think that, as I've said before, the decision she made this year to really plan out a competition season that was going to allow her to build back not just the strength, but the confidence that goes along with it to do that was a huge deal. I mean, there was a ton of pulling from the floor. It was the things she was the worst at in WFP Mesa, and she did just fine here relative to the field. I think that we were talking about those top women, that Emma Lawson is a person who can beat a Lucy Campbell, who might be able to beat Alex Kazan sometime in the 12 months. And at some point in her career, maybe even win a competition like this, win a CrossFit Games, win a WFP season. So it's great to see her back. super young, and I think it'll be interesting to see how she continues to manage that situation as he gets more confidence. And Olivia, I mean, I would say, given what we saw from the games, we know that the potential's there. Given what we know from programming, this is very close to where I had projected her to be. It's still a big deal to go out there and do that. The one thing that stood out for me, even though the finish wasn't amazing, it's kind of like Danielle Brandon. Her running just looked better. Danielle's strength looked better. It might not be yielding the same competition results, but Wes, I wanted to ask you about that from the athlete perspective. When you know you've been putting work on something and you go and execute, and it feels better than it has before, even if the result isn't significantly better, what can that do for someone as they go forward and continue to compete?
It's like an emotional roller coaster because I've put in so much time and so much effort into something, and I've gotten better and I see the improvement, but it's not good enough, and that's what's really hard, I think, as an athlete is sometimes, for example, the other day I did a workout that I knew a buddy of mine was doing. And I said, okay, this is a workout full of things I'm bad at. And I said, okay, well, I executed this workout perfectly. I finished the workout. I was all excited about it. Okay, no mistakes. I was able to move through the workout. I felt really confident. I texted my buddy my time, and he texted me back his time. And he beat me by 2 minutes, right? And this is a workout that I'm doing unbroken and trying to, cycle these weights pretty well. And so at first, right, you're like, okay, that's awesome. I cycled through it. I did everything. And then you have that reality check of, okay, well, I still need to work on it. It's still not good enough. And I think the same thing can be said of like Olivia or a Danielle in the same vein. You look at both these athletes and you see those improvements and it's exciting, but a lot of times it feels like a losing battle, right? You feel like you're still so far away. And I think that the best athletes are going to just keep hammering away at that. And that's advice that I've gotten several times, and advice that I try to give to other athletes is, when you're moving that needle, sometimes you got to move it a long way. And so it feels like a losing battle, but you just got to keep working on it.
I'm going to sort of the middle portion of the women's leaderboard. We see Ariel Lowen there in 10th. I talked with Andrew in the preview that she'd been consistently increasing her finish at Rogue. This was like a 2-year step backwards relative to what she was able to do at Rogue the past years. So this would be like, what year was that? 2022. She finished 10th, and she's back to 10th here. We also see Alexis Raptis there in 12th, outside of the top 10. Anything from watching them, Wes, that's kind of stood out to you, good, bad, otherwise? Are you concerned about these finishes? Is it just kind of it is what it is? They can still bounce back from it. What do you think about these finishes that are maybe like 5 to 7 spots lower than we'd?
I think I might have lost you there. Hold up, say it one more time.
Ariel Lowen and Alexis Raptis. I think a lot of people are used to seeing them contend for podiums. Here they're, just on the outside of the top 10, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to credit the programming for some of that. You see, we just talked about, with our first and second place finisher, no worse than 11th in any event. And you see both Ariel and Alexis have 19th finishes. And I think you see that across the weekend from a lot of athletes that you might have expected to do better. When you have a 19th or a 20th place finish in an event, it's going to hold you back significantly. You're taking a 0 or you're taking 5 points on an event. It's like competing in 8 of the 9 events. So you look at that, and I think Ariel did not look like herself on the final day. She looked like something was going on. I don't know. I don't have any inside knowledge. PCU would probably talk to her, has more info on that, but I don't know what was wrong. But the last 2 events specifically, she looked like she was checked out, and I don't know if that was an injury or if she wasn't where she wanted to be over the weekend, but she didn't look like herself. So I want to see more from her, and I think we can expect more from her. She's someone that, like you said, is a contender. And I think that last day was not her day for whatever reason. The same thing from Alexis. I think Alexis had a couple bad finishes, and she didn't have good enough finishes to balance those out.
Nothing better than
Colton. You look at Colton winning events, and he has negative enough finishes on other things that is going to hold him back over the course of the weekend. It's hard to have event wins and then have events where you're getting 17th, 19th on because it's very hard to come back from those, like we said.
Yeah, and it's also like I think athletes, especially like Ariel Lowen, she's very aware of kind of what's going on in the reality of a competition. I mean, she did have another bad finish this year at Wadapalooza that was just like totally uncharacteristic. She took 17th, but it's another thing Andrew and I talked about. Look at the prize distribution. If you're not in the top five, then it's kind of like what's it really worth to the athletes if they're there to try to compete to win big money and they know that they have other competitions that they still want to do. And at some point, I mean, 10th place and 20th place is no difference in prize money, which is, it's, you can look at it both ways. Like, it's great because everyone's leaving with at least $5,000, but it also maybe discourages athletes like that from really going after it on the last day when they know that there's not that much bang for their buck compared to the output. Certainly there, were other people here that were noticing something was up with her. I've talked about this with regards to Jeff Adler at the games. I think he was in a similar situation where he knew he wasn't physically at 100%. He knew he wasn't making the podium, so he just finished the competition without doing any more damage, accept it for what it was, get ready for the next one. So for athletes like that, I could understand making a conservative decision on a last day, just kind of getting through it. And then, certainly we know that Alexis and Ariel can bounce back from something like this. So we'll look at the bottom of the leaderboard before we switch over to the men. I mean, this is the case with a lot of rookies in competition at Rogue, that they often have this sort of like slow start. We saw some athletes make these comments, but down here we do have Paige Rogers, who's, it's not, she's coming, like, everything's kind of new for her right now, but we also have Elisa Filiano, Abigail Domet, and excuse me, who else am I forgetting? Oh yeah, Paige was the other qualifier that came through. Patrick, you were on site there, seeing the bottom of this leaderboard. Would you say overall that these athletes, even though they had a low finish, still had a good and valuable experience at Rogue this year?
Well, I was able to talk to Elisa about this prior, and this was one of those things, to complete her career. This has always been a goal of hers, and it's her to finally make it. She looked like she was having fun out there. She knew. I mean, I think I forgot what event it was, but she was one of the last. It might have been the deadlift. I don't know, but she was one of the last people across. But she was throwing her hands up there like she had won, and she, I think after day one, I think, or maybe halfway through day two, it was kind of one of those things where, okay, I know what the rest of my weekend is going to look like. I'm just going to, one, not hurt myself and try to make it through the weekend, but also enjoy the moment. Elisa was definitely that person. Paige was definitely that person. Semenza. I was able to talk to Paige. She's not really happy with you, Brian, and she took it out on me. But
what?
But she was going through some things, just personally and stuff, and for her to show up at this event. I mean, personally and as an athlete, just a lot of changes that are going on in her life, and for her to show up at this event and compete, it was like, that was a win for her. She was kind of bummed about the duel. She was really excited about the duel because she, those are her type of workout, and kind of upset with her stumble on that. And then, I was kind of, Abigail was one of those athletes. I thought, on paper, I thought she was going to do really good in this type of format. And I maybe, again, it's a rookie year, and maybe it's kind of a whole new shock to the system. But she looks like she has the build and the capabilities of doing really good with programming. I'm sure she wasn't too happy with her performance. I didn't get to talk to her much, and then Paige just dealing with, she had a baby with her, and thank God Paige's mom, a saint. I mean, Wes, you've met her before. Paige's mom is amazing. She was on mom duty all weekend, but I think one of the best moments I saw was her mom brought their daughter out for the final event, and Paige finished, and it wasn't the finish that Paige wanted, but as soon as she saw her baby, her face lit up, went over there, kissed her, and I think that just kind of made things right in the world. But 14th in this event against that quality field, it's impressive. I thought Emily Rolfe did a good job of kind of working her way back in too.
Yeah, she did. Emily Rolfe, well, worked her way back in, but I still think the standout performance for Rolfe came on the first day with the back squat dumbbell snatch clean workout. I don't think anyone saw that coming, kind of challenging Laura throughout. Wes, last thought on the women. I want to give you a chance to say something about Paige Rogers, obviously a close friend of yours, but also that thing that Patrick just said. When you have other things in your life that are so important, a child, faith, that are like kind of family staples of the Mayhem community, what is that? How does that affect, I would say, competitors in a positive way when they're able to sort of immediately have that feedback that I care so much about how I do on the floor, but it isn't everything in my life.
Yeah, 100%. I think Luke Parker talked about it best, and this is something that he used to talk to me a lot. But it was this idea of having a purpose-based identity over a performance-based identity. And people at Mayhem have that, and people in the sport have that in different ways. And there's a different purpose behind, why they do what they do. And everyone has a different reason they're competing and they're out there on the floor. But switching from that mindset of performance-based identity, my placement is my identity. How well I do is how people are going to care about me. And we've seen this with athletes across the sport, athletes that place their value in themselves on a leaderboard, and it leads to burnout, and it leads to people not being happy with how they're doing. And I think that Paige is a great example of someone that has a purpose-based identity. And obviously part of that's rooted in faith, and the other part of that's rooted in her family. So it's cool. I mean, it's like you come off the floor and you realize that, okay, hey, I didn't go as fast on an echo bike as I wanted, but my less than a year-old daughter, my 9-month-old daughter's here waiting for me at the finish line, and she doesn't care how I did on an echo bike. All she cares about is I'm going to hold her and she's going to cry. And it just doesn't, it changes the way that you look at events and changes the way that you approach competition. And I think you see that a lot across the sport, even with people's experiences prior to or during competition. You see people that come from a line of work as a first responder, right? And you have a bad workout, and okay, I think about Alex Vigneault is another example of this, another Mayhem athlete, classic. But you see another example of someone that, okay, hey, I didn't have a great event or a great finish, but okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to work a couple 24-hour shifts. It's just your gauge of what a negative thing is, or what a negative life event is very different than someone who lives and breathes CrossFit, and their performance is their identity.
T-Bird's asking about Haley, and I think she falls right in line with this conversation. Is like, I remember meeting Haley when she was 16, 17, 18, 19, watching her compete. And you want to talk about a person whose identity was tied to performance. I mean, that was absolutely her focus in every aspect of her life. She's taken the last couple of years to, I think, really dive deep inside herself, find more of that purpose-driven life outside of competition. I think she's learned along the way that she actually does like competing. And what I've seen from her, yes, she's pulled out of the WFP events, but in the competitions that she has showed up to do, I've seen her, what she puts on social media, what you see on the competition floor, regardless of results, it all adds up to me as a person who is very confident in who she is. She's happy to go out there and compete. She doesn't, I don't think she lets a bad finish. She hates it, I'm sure, because she's still competitive, but she doesn't let it ruin her day. She doesn't let it ruin her week. She doesn't let it ruin her life. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. I know there's people that will say that that's a weak mentality and that you're never going to be a champion that way. Maybe that works for some people, but for most people, having something in their life that's important to them allows them to pursue excellence in their career at a higher level. And if you're not in that camp, I think you can't be the person that's only and consistently pursuing excellence in career forever. That's going to catch up with you, whether you're an executive of a company, as an independent business owner, an athlete, or anything in between. So yes, it's a last place finish for Haley on the leaderboard, but I think if you look at everything that she's doing in her life, I don't think she feels like she's losing out right now.
No, I think she's happy with where she's at in life. And I think that, like you said, she doesn't have as much of that identity in the leaderboard anymore. And that's a positive thing. And I think she's shown, she's really happy with where she's at mentally, and really happy where she's at relationally. I think that people sometimes can get this idea, and I think they have this idea that athletes that athletes owe them something when they show up to a competition. And the truth is that they did the work to get there, and their performance is something they're very proud of and they're very obviously heavily involved in. And so I think that sometimes I saw that a lot of comments about this with Haley's performance this weekend. Oh, well, you shouldn't have shown up if you weren't prepared. You shouldn't have done this or that. She earned the right to be there. Whether she performs to your standard or not, she earned the right to be there by being one of the best women in the world at the sport. So she showed up. She competed all weekend. She didn't withdraw. She didn't stand there and do nothing. She tried her best all weekend. And I think that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, very much similar to Noah Olson last year. He wasn't coming in perfect condition, but he earned the right to be there through his career and his performances. And he did what he could do. Let's move on to the men, Patrick. We'll kind of start at the top again. And I think I'm just going to lay this out there. I mean, I had picked Adler to win this. Obviously, he did win it. But it has been a tough year for him. Patrick got a nice interview there with him, basically saying that until 6 weeks, 8 weeks or so prior to this competition, he hadn't really felt healthy the entire year. I think that clearly shows in some of the way that he's competed at the first WFB Tour stop and at the games. Obviously, he backed out of the second tour stop. Wes, watching Jeff this weekend, what stood out to you? What impressed you most about this? It ends up being a back-to-back championship now for him at Rogue, and it's a short list. It's Fraser, it's Fellner, it's Medeiros, and it's Adler, and now he's done it twice. Again,
the same thing as the women's leaderboard consistency won out, right? No, same thing as what we saw with the top two women, right? No finishes worse than 11th for Jeff. And I think that he showed up in good form. And I think that he made the right decision pulling out of WFP2 to get healthy and come back and show people that he was still the same athlete that won Rogue last year and the same athlete that won the games. So I think Jeff had an incredible weekend. And I think he's a very cerebral competitor. He's very aware. He knows what he's doing. He knows exactly how well he needs to do on an event to do well. And I think that can be a positive thing and a negative thing. I think it negatively affected his games finish. Cause like you said, on the last day, if you realize, hey, I'm not going to have the finish I want or the placement that I want, then that could be a negative thing as a competitor. But in this case, right, with the momentum and doing well, I think it did him very well.
I'm going to say that for me personally, this might be Jeffrey's most impressive win ever. I'm talking over the games too, because there's a lot of people that say like, oh, the only reason why he won it in 2023 is because Roman fractured his foot. And then last year at Rogue, he was pretty much in control most of the time. This year he had to come back to win this. He had Vellner, Justin Medeiros, and when we talk about Roman, there's so much I want to say about Roman and how he performed this weekend. But in terms of Jeffrey, I think this might be.
That's okay. I'm sure Wes doesn't have any comments about Roman, so you can have all the.
Yeah. But in terms of Jeffrey, I think by knowing what he dealt with this whole year, and then coming back and winning this, I think it's this will go back and he'll look at this as probably his most impressive and probably most memorable win. And I think he acted like it was. And I look back and I was like, I should have asked him that question. But it just this the way he did it, and it's just really impressive to me.
Adler appears the only guy when healthy that is not program dependent. T-Bird says, so happy for Adler after watching the Blue Jays lose the World Series. I'm glad we got a Canadian win somewhere. Yeah, I mean, Adler's place in the history of the sport is still being written. But, when you two-time Rogue champion, one-time games champion, doesn't get like the accolades, are few and far between athletes who've been able to, get three top of the podiums at those two competitions combined. So he's right up there. I do think that he's in the conversation for, the fittest in any field that he shows up to healthy. Patrick, you said something to me this weekend that I was thinking, and then you said it, that this might have been the best Justin Medeiros that you've ever seen. And you've been watching this guy for a long time. What made you say that about him?
Two things: his physical appearance, and two, you could see it in his eyes. He had some drive. He wanted this. But in terms of physical appearance, this is the best shape I've seen him in. And I'm talking the games too. When he won the games, we saw a leaner, more athletic Justin Medeiros that I've ever seen before. And it's crazy because, we saw him at SoCal and it almost looked like he just did a cut. He did like a weight cut. Maybe he just, stopped eating salt or something. But, he just looked very athletic, very thin, he looked great. And I told his parents that, and, they're like, man, thanks. He's really been working on that. And I talked to Dallas's videographer about it. He's like, yeah, he's been working hard since SoCal. I mean, really the whole season, just trying to get to that point. I even made the joke is like maybe he's trying to make a bid to be number one on Hiller's natty or not list, but he looked great. I mean, like I said, the most athletic I've seen. And then when he was out on the competition floor, you could see. I mean, from the first event that he did, it's like last year. Remember he won an event and no one knew that because he was in the far lane. He kind of jumped on, and not many people captured that. The broadcast missed it all completely. He was kind of an afterthought. I think, and I attribute this a lot to his friend network, and I'm talking about the Boys Interrupted. He's surrounded by a bunch of guys, and this goes back to almost like the the Froning, Bridges, Bailey, friendship that they had. He's got that now, and they're all kind of like fighting each other and leveling each other up. And Justin's kind of been outside looking in. Yeah, he's won a fitness, he's won the games twice. But when you stack it up against Sprague, Hopper, and Dallin, what has Justin done lately? Well, you know what he's done lately? He's finished second at Rogue, which is very, very impressive, considering what he's had to do, and him being a little bit older and more experienced than some of those guys.
You and I were talking earlier today that this, I got pretty much every male athlete in the top 10, but I would say I actually missed on a lot of picks because if they're pretty much always the top 10 at this point. And I would say if you're off by even one spot, Grace, I'll give you, and I'll say that's a good pick. But I was off by 7 on Justin, 3 on James, 4 on Hopper, 4 on Ricky, et cetera, et cetera. I was also off by, I think, 3 or 4 on Roman. And Wes, I'd like to get your perspective on this, followed up by Patrick's. I mean, obviously a bad first day, a crazy good last, everything after the first 2 workouts. And he won WFP2. I think that's his biggest win of his career. He backs it up with a 3rd place at Rogue. It's a place that he has been before 2 seasons ago. But, in the interview you did with Patrick, you could tell that it wasn't what he came there for. For me, I would just say it's great to see Roman back competing for podiums and wins. But Wes, as someone who trains with him, sees him train all the time, what did you see from Roman this weekend?
Roman's always going to show up to win. He's, he told PC that during his interview, and I think that's the mindset that he approaches every competition with. Is it's not good enough unless I stay on top of the podium. I think WFP was a really good step in the right direction for him with winning the event, having the confidence of overcoming, maybe this mental block of not having been in the podium conversation for a second. And I think that's really cool for him to finally come back after an injury a couple of years ago and to see, or last year, and to see, hey, I belong here and I can do this again. And it's hard. I mean, you look at athletes that start off the weekend with 2, 15 plus place finishes, and you're not going to see another athlete that does better than Roman. So
it was actually very reminiscent to Dallin Pepper at WFP2.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to something that they have in common, which is that they're very mentally tough. Yes. And that they understand through competition how to take the blows sometimes and still go back out there and compete hard. Patrick, I know that you've got a ton to say about Roman, so let us have it.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up that comparison down at WFP2, but that was 6 events. We're talking 9 grueling events here. And and that's what's even more impressive. Like I said,
plus the 10th event for Roman, a little breakdance.
Exactly. Yeah, he won the breakdancing. He won breakdancing. It was hands down breakdancing. But we're talking about like the whole brand and style points and I think we'll talk about this later. But the lack of style from the men's podium. Well, I think Roman gets style points for him dancing before he got to the podium. But Roman, I mean, I had him pretty much dead in the water after those first 2 events. Like, man, he just does not look like he wants to be here or whatever. And then he turns around. It's like his worst finish was the 7th. Worst finish. So he had 6.
And I actually think that workout was like kind of his best finish I was most
Yeah.
impressed with him on that one because all of the other big guys were taking blows on that. And he, big range of motion with the overhead squat and the burpee. A lot of the smaller athletes filtered to the top, and he and James both kind of hung in there. But I mean, he was still 6 spots better than him.
Yeah, but 6 out of the last 7 workouts, he finished top 5 or better. And it just and he was having fun. Like, he really wanted that win in the duel, and he was having some fun in that duel. I think he really wanted that. Jason just was just a little bit more stronger getting that sandbag up on the pedestal. But he was having fun out there. He was, again, got tons of pictures of him celebrating, having fun with the crowds, giving high fives. He had a pretty, he was having fun out there. I think him and Harry Lightfoot were the guys, you could see were just enjoying the moment and living in that moment and creating memories. But then again, you see that other side in the interviews. Like, I came to win, but that guy, he comes to win, but he's going to have fun at the same time. So, I mean, it's just, just really impressed by him and happy and proud of him. And it was really cool. It was an honor to get to talk to him and get, afterwards. And it's cool. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does WFP, because he's said in the interview, he's looking for that number 1 spot.
Yeah, he's excited that they'll be swimming there. Jeff said it this time. You've heard the male athletes at the top of sports say it all year long. It's really competitive. It's really hard to make 1 podium. To make 2 podiums back to back like he just did, it's a huge achievement, and I absolutely don't doubt that he'll be fighting for another one in a few weeks in Denmark. James Sprague finished 4th, and I actually think that the couple of workouts here where he maybe even left some points on the table. I think in particular the skier workout, he was a little bit conservative on the ski because he was nervous about the handstand push-ups, and I don't think he needed to be, but that's in the past. All things said and done, he misses the podium here, but I kind of think this was his most impressive performance of the year. Wes, do you think that's a hot take, or can you understand that?
No, I understand that for sure. I think that James's consistency is his superpower. He's so consistent across not only events of competition weekend, but events throughout the year. You see him doing well. You see him podiuming. You see him in that top 5 conversation every time he shows up. And I think he's solidified. I think there were a lot of, and everyone's talked about this, I think, at this point, but I'll say it again. There were a lot of questions after he won the games in 2024 about whether it was a legitimate win and whether he deserved to win the games. And I think this year he silenced everyone that asked that question and said, yes, I deserve to be here. I'm in the conversation every single time I show up to compete, not only to be on the podium, to be in that top 5, but to win. And I think he's had a very impressive year.
And it's, there's some comments from earlier about James' back squat performance being impressive, and also just the amount of consistency. And, I know everyone has widespread opinions about WFP, but by the time they finish up this year, it's going to be 20 plus workouts that the athletes, maybe close to 25 point scoring opportunities that they'll have had. And James has a big buffer going into that. I mean, he has set himself up well to potentially be the champion of that season, which would be sort of it's a different, we talk about recovery, but it's a different style to do well at 3 different competitions across a year and have all of those add up to a championship. But it makes sense when you think about what Wes has said. I mean, this guy is in the mix every single time he shows up. I thought Rogue was the one competition that wouldn't be the case for, and he's proven me wrong once again, as he seems to love to do. Someone who I was much more accurate with here, but I still think had an amazing weekend is Jay Crouch. And, Andrew asked me, what, you picked him 6th? I'm like, yeah, well, he's always 6th. Here he's 5th. It's only 1 spot difference, but when the field of men is that difficult, I mean, he's inching towards that podium. Do either one of you think that we could see Jay on a major podium in the next year or 2?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Patrick, do you have a chance to talk to Jay at all this weekend?
Yeah, I interviewed him after day 1. I don't know. It's just like, it's really hard. I mean, again, that top 8, we talk about it, and that's not including Jay. I mean, I don't include Jay in that top 8, but he certainly should be now. he's younger than Ricky. Him and Ricky train a lot together, and I think that's just going to make him better. I mean, I actually think he might even, like in the instance here, where if we would have told you that Ricky finished 5th and Jay finished, 7th, I mean, that's kind of I mean, I know it's only 2 spots, but that we'd be okay with that. Or if Ricky finished 3rd versus Jay finishing 7th or 8th. I think Jay, I don't know about podiums at a major event. I do think he's going to switch out with Ricky, and just like this, where he's going to overtake him. I just don't know if he has that. There's not many athletes that can win a podium that can't win events, and I haven't seen Jay win events yet. Ricky can win events. Jay's
an athlete like Justin, though.
Well, I know, but I said, but Justin's at a different. But you saw where Justin, he won his games due to a particular set of a unique programming. Boz programmed for that. And Justin's probably one of the best when it comes to adapting and doing odd things. He's a very athletic person. A lot of people don't give him enough credit how athletic he is. I mean, he's a former wrestler. You have to be athletic to be a wrestler. I don't know yet. I still I don't know. To answer your question, I don't know. It's going to be hard for him, which makes it even better if he does break into a podium at one of these top events. Because if he does that, then yes, I'm ready to do that. But that means he's beat some of the best that have consistently have done it.
I mean, I'm looking at his performances here, and I see his worst performances on the duel, which is, I always say when it comes to Rogue, it's coming, so you can't discount it. But I'm not too stressed about 11th and 12th place finishes on the duel. Sometimes that's really down to a tenth of a second, a little misstep, whatever. That I wouldn't be too worried about that. 9th place finish on the running workout, and also on the crux on the morning before the duel are his other 2 worst finishes. But Wes was talking about it. All top 10s is great, but when you only have one finish of first, second, or third, you're definitely giving away some big points. If Jay's able to convert a 4th and a 6th into a 2nd and a 3rd, those extra points on a leaderboard, now you're talking about a guy who can potentially get on the podium. So what I've seen from Jay is a consistent and steady progression forward. We talked about proven earlier a little bit. I think he may be singularly the athlete who's benefited the most from that transition, and his performances and results since then have shown that. So I'm with Wes on this. I do see Jay as having a chance to get on a podium in the next 2 seasons at a big competition. I think that he's not rushing his strength progressions. He still takes a little bit of a hit on some of those, but for his size, for where he's come from to where he is now, I think he's done a phenomenal job. I think he's very comfortable with the team there, and I think that he's moving in the right direction. Wes, I gotta ask you this, because you brought it up about James. 2024 wins the games. People weren't sure about it. 2025, Jason wins the games. Quite frankly, he's had 2 lackluster finishes following that up, outside of the top 5 at both of them. Is there any reason that we should be talking about if that was a fluky win for Jason?
That's a good question. And I think that you look at James's finish last year, sick or not, right? He had a poor finish at Rogue. And I think that it's really, really hard. And we talked about this with WFP. It's really hard coming back from winning something you've been chasing for potentially your whole life or years. At a minimum, you've been chasing for years. You finally achieve that goal. It's really hard to come back and do really well in the next 6 months. I think where that changes, right, is when you go into that next year. You look at James's Rogue last year into his Wadapalooza, into his WFP, into his game season, and he's shown, okay, no, this wasn't a fluke. Hey, I had a lackluster performance at Rogue. I think it's the same thing for Jason. I think that he's beat down after competing so much this year. He's had to compete a lot, just as much as a lot of these other guys. And I think that you'll see next year that Jason's not, I don't think that was a fluke performance. I think he belongs in that, at least in the podium conversation, if not in the conversation to win it.
I mean, it's interesting to me. The men in particular, we were missing Dallin here, which by the way was weird. I felt really weird not seeing him out there. We were missing Adler at WFP too. But for the most part, the men have shown up consistently throughout the year. And I think it's this kind of conversation, like in the past, we know that every athlete has been singularly focused on making the games and singularly focused on being at absolute optimal physical peak performance when they get there. And this year we don't have all the athletes who are even trying, and we have some athletes who may be, yeah, they're making it there, but there's other things that are going on. Think about Jonakowski as an example. I know he's not in that top echelon, but like in the past, that was he put everything into that. This year, he did it because he made it through the last chance qualifier. He was his 10th one. He wanted to show up, and so there's like, but at the end of the day, that's the most prestigious title that still exists. And you have to kind of think that being able to show up to the one that everyone wants and win it counts for something. I think that it's fun to look back and say, okay, well, he beat James there, but James has beaten him every other place that they've competed this season. And then that breeds this thing that I've been kind of hinting at all year, is a fun conversation. Mm-hmm. Would you rather have the guy who can win the one everyone wants, or the guy who can beat that guy 5 out of 6 times on the year, but didn't get him at the big one?
It's like it's a conversation like, okay, well, do you want NBA rings, or do you want, to be a consistently better player who just barely misses in the playoffs all the time? And I think the answer for most players will probably be the rings. And I think that's true of both guys. Both guys are games champions. I think if you ask both guys, would you rather place third all year round or get a single games win? I think the answer for both of them and for everyone in this field, they'd rather win the games. I think that consistency is incredible and it's very impressive, but I think everyone wants that. Everyone wants that title. So I'm confident that Jason moving into next year, right, with WFP to cap off this year, moving into next year, Jason's going to keep what is his main thing, which is winning the games, from everything he said. So
I got another question for you guys here. So this season so far, we've had WFP 1, Austin Hatfield got the win. CrossFit Games, Jason Hopper gets the win. WFP 2, Roman gets the win. Rogue Invitational, Adler gets the win. 4 major competition fields, 4 different winners. Copenhagen, Lumen. Will one of those 4 guys win in Copenhagen, or will we have a 5th different winner at the end of the year?
That's a hard question to ask, because you do have your top, like we talked about after the games and leading into WFP, you have your top 8. You have a very definitive, hey, we have 8 guys that can really vie for this. And I think that to say that any of those guys, there's no shot that they win the WFP final if they're in that field, I think that would be silly. And that would be, I think it would be ignorant to say that there's no chance that one of those guys comes out and surprises. But with that in mind, I think that one of the 4 guys is going to do it. I think someone's going to come in with enough of that. Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah. I like what Lynn's. Yeah. Right now, Sprague is the current leaderboard in WFP. Isn't he first?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got a 50-point edge over, I think, Hatfield and Roman.
Yeah, and I like Sprague in a, I don't know what, we got 9, 10, 11 events for WFP in Copenhagen. I like Sprague in a longer workout like that, or long, 4-day competition like that. So we might have 5 different champions. And right now, Sprague looks really good. He's in a good position right now. And we also know Sprague has home run capabilities. We know there's a pool involved, and Sprague is one of the best, if not the best swimmers. Roman might have to have something to say about that, but or Yona, or there's some pretty good swimmers in this field. But yeah, I like Sprague, I really do. But but that's just a fun thing. Like we said, the top 8. It could be argued top 9. So, but right now it's anyone's shot, and Dallon's not too far either. We don't know if Dallon. Hopefully Dallon will be there. He'll get the clear to be at Copenhagen, but he's another threat.
Looking at the back half of the top 10 here, we got Vellner in 8th, Colton Mertens in 9th, Austin Hatfield in 10. Patrick, I know you spent a lot of time with Vellner this weekend. Man, he was looking incredible for 2 days and kind of fell apart on the last day. What's the takeaway for people who are wondering what happened to Vellner on Sunday?
Well, I think takeaways is just not enough time to recover. I just marveled at him going over those logs. He looked like freaking Spider-Man. He looked like a younger. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Vellner that athletic, and he looked very athletic. I'm not saying that Vellner isn't athletic, but he's kind of a brute guy, But he looked good after day one. But I mean, I think after day two, and I think he just went all out on day two, and just you start day one with a run. He wasn't going to win the run, so he had to manage that run. I think what he had to do is he was trying to manage the run, knowing he had two events that he's probably we're going to struggle with, especially with this field. Not struggling, but struggle in comparison to the field. He's so it kind of sucks for him, but it was great to see though. I mean, this is two good performances we've seen Pat ever since since World Fitness Project, since Indianapolis. I think he's figured it out in terms of what he needs to do to focus and to be prepared for these events. And that's saying a lot for someone who's been in the game for so long, because, obviously things change and his life changed. He's got multiple children now. He's just, he's moving. There's a lot of stuff going on in his life. And, he's kind of out there all by himself on an island. So not literally an island. He used to be. Now he's actually inland, but, he's kind of out there, and he's just training. And, that has to do something for someone, I mean, even if you like to be alone, we know Pat, we kind of know him pretty well. I mean, he's a very social person, but, just we'll see what happens. I mean, but overall, I was really impressed by the first 2 days, and he had a right attitude when I talked to him yesterday. It's like, hey, just didn't have it for day three. And that's the thing about Pat. Pat tells it as it is.
Wes, Colton Mertens, another Rogue Invitational, right around this 10th place mark again. Obviously, you can look at his competition finishes there. You see the wins, you see the basically losses. To me, this is a guy that just feels like it's like maximizing his potential, but he can't get any higher up on the leaderboard. What's it going to take for him to make that next jump?
He's going to have to shore up those 19ths, which is an easy answer and probably a little bit of a cop out. But he's got two 19ths and a 16th, and you can't do that, and a 15th, and you can't do that if you want to be contending for those top spots. The great thing about Colton is he does have that home run potential, which makes him really, really fun to watch. And I think that he has a lot of opportunity to make up some ground in those things he's weaker at. That's the thing that I'm curious to see over the next year. Is we've seen progression from Colton, even in the last few years, of saying, oh, I know I'm bad at something. I know I'm bad at this. And working with Joey and working with Proven, say, okay, let's get better at this. And Joey's got a great mind, a good programmer. So I want to see what he does to improve this. I think Colton is more all in terms of what he's doing on the farm than he's ever been. I think he's doing more right now with CrossFit than he's ever done. And I want to see what Joey can do and how he can shore up those holes.
Over under on 2 weeks before there's a horizontal pegboard up next to his log in his barn.
I'll take that.
Hey, one thing I do want to say about Colton is like, I think how he shores those up is he probably needs to spend a little bit more time down in Nashville when those guys come in town, and train with them somewhere, somehow, or make a couple more trips down there or something. He does really good by himself, but I always think he's one of those guys who feeds off competition as well, and that shit talking. And he's a really good. I mean, he fits in well with Jay and Ricky when they're around each other. I think I saw that all weekend, and it looks like he was having fun and kind of integrated with those guys. But I will give him props. Finishing 9th and not 10th made him an extra almost $5,500. So
double his pay.
Exactly. So I don't know if you knew that going into that final event, because it was close. Again, he finished 16th, but but that 9th place is like, hey, 9th place, that's where you want to be. At Rogue, be it. It's like, it kind of reminds me of the Tropics from what was it? Semi-Pro, when they're cheering 7th place.
Dude, there's always a line. Like, I remember the years in Dubai where like they paid out through 7th or something, and everyone else got $500. And it was like going into that last event, the guys in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, like they were very, very aware. There was $5,000 on the line for one spot, maybe 5 points on a leaderboard. Holding the most weight below the waist doesn't bode well for horizontal pegboard. Well said, Jake.
I mean, Colton, 3 weeks, 3 weeks, between, I mean, in the last 3 weeks between Crash and this, he's made over 20 grand. So, I mean, that buys a lot of wiener dogs.
Wes, another athlete from Mayhem in 10th there, Hatfield. I mean, in terms of the big competitions this year, he's now gone 1st, 5th, 9th, 10th. It's clearly moving in the wrong direction. Are you concerned about Hatfield's ability to get back and compete for top 5's podium and wins? Or are these just a little bit maybe, learning curves of a guy who does have less competition experience than the rest of the top 10?
I think it's been a really long year, and we've talked about that a lot, and it truly has been. So I think if you look at an athlete like Austin obviously has the potential to be a top 5 athlete at the games, a top 10 athlete at the games. He's shown that. And so for him to be 10th in this field and finishing behind people that he finished ahead of at the games and he's beat at WFP1, I think it shows that he's probably not where he wants to be right now. He's probably also really tired. And I think that people are taking an off season. They have to find a place to take an off season. People can't take an off season. They're not going to have it successful next year. So I'm curious to see and hear kind of when people decide to take that off season. You see people taking it after the games, leading into Waterpalooza SoCal. You see Justin, right, where no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to really prime myself and peak for an event like Rogue. So I think it's people are in different parts of the season, which is something that we haven't really experienced a whole lot before outside of semifinals in the games. You see people at semifinals and you say, oh, well, how did they get 5th at semifinals and then 4th at the games? I think you see the same thing here. People need to take some time to work on their weaknesses and to have a legitimate offseason if they want to go into the next year getting better. So I don't know if that's the situation that Austin's in. And if I did, I wouldn't tell you. But I don't know where he's at and where his fitness is at right now outside of, this finish. But I do know that everyone's going to have an off season at some point this year, and they're going to have competition results that are not good if you're competing 9 or 10 months out of the year.
Yeah. The other thing I would just add about Hatfield, I mean, look at the results there, and something that he has done in the past is he's usually pretty good on the last day. And even and I think that's a good thing to hold on to from a weekend that may have been an underwhelming finish for him on the leaderboard, is that he still has that ability to withstand a tough competition and show up better on the last day relative to some of the other guys in the field. So it's always, you always hearken all the way back to Rich Froning on Sunday. And like that standard was established really early on in our sport, that if you can last over a 2 and 3 day competition, there's a lot of room to make up ground. He was never in the top 10 until the end of the competition. So even though he didn't get that 9th place money, he actually picked a bunch of people off on those last 3 events. So I think that if you're looking for a silver lining, that's definitely one for Hatfield.
Yeah. And I think that too, there's so many different implements, strange implements during the competition. You look at even like Syndicate Crown when Austin hopped in on one of the spectator workouts and wasn't able to do a cut rope, legless rope climb. There are some of those niche skills, and he's still a newer athlete. He's still working on some of those more niche skills. And I know that's something he's been hammering and working on, and it's not something that he doesn't touch, right? But those are skills that it takes a long time to develop. You look at Jason getting an almost dead last finish in the log bar muscle up workout. Someone commented, I think someone from, I think it might have been Quentin from Crash. Someone commented, well, if only you had a crash to work or a log to work on it at Crash. And the truth is you can have all the access to this equipment. And sometimes, there's still a long learning curve and a long time that people have to spend on these implements. I think someone commented, was T-Bird, talking about the horizontal pegboard, saying, I'm surprised athletes struggled on it after watching Fikowski put on a clinic last year. And I think it's easy to have that question. I understand where it comes from, but I think it can be similar to, taking, an athlete and saying, hey, you've never done a muscle up before. Watch me do this muscle up and I'll be really efficient. That doesn't mean that they can do it, right? And it doesn't mean they can replicate it. And it takes a lot of athleticism and a lot of practice to become efficient at a movement. You can take someone that's even okay at a movement, and to make them, a 90th percentile athlete at a certain movement to a 100 percentile athlete is a long way. And I think you see that over the course of the weekend with a lot of these implements.
Yeah, and I was talking about it a bit before and during the competition that I expected athletes to, across the board, improve at the log muscle up, improve at the horizontal pegboard. But, we've seen athletes in the history of the sport that have known there's a problem, attacked it relentlessly, and not made much progress. And sometimes that just happens too. And maybe there's not a great scientific explanation for it. PC, I know you got something to add here.
Yeah, I would just say a lot of what you guys said, a lot of those might be answered. I have an interview with Austin that I'll throw up after the show.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. Chandler Smith, 11th place. He wasn't happy with it, I guess, but it was, this is exactly where I picked him to be. It's a better finish than he had at either of the WFP Tour stops this year. He's a mainstay at Rogue. Obviously, having him there is a huge win. I mean, the crowd loves him. He's nothing. You can't say a bad thing about Chandler. But I want to, Patrick, get your take on Henrik Haapalainen. I picked him last, just basically not having any idea where he was at a year after tearing the Achilles. He messaged me and he goes, "I understand the pick, but that's not going to happen." And from my perspective, I was impressed. What did you see there?
100%. I mean, the one thing that stuck out, I interviewed him at the end of day two, right at the beginning of day two, actually, when he finished sixth? Yeah, he finished sixth in that event, won the heat, and he was just so pumped up about it. And in that interview, he says, "I predict myself I'm going to be in the top 10 when we start at the end of the day." And what was he? He was top 10. So he called his shot. He knew. The thing is, he knows what his strengths and weaknesses were, and he played right into them. And he looks good. This is, again, kind of like Justin. And again, I'm like, just fawning over these dudes' bodies and stuff. But that's the best I've seen him look in terms of like physique wise. He looked more athletic. He looks unbelievable. And I think having that year off to kind of, spend some time alone and just and train and get his mind right, I think it's going to help him. And that's really impressive by Henrik, and I'm looking forward to see. I mean, we saw what he did during like their game season, where him and Yona had some really impressive open and quarterfinal type finishes. But if this Henrik, if this is transferable, if this is the new Henrik, then you're looking at a guy who's going to contend for titles in Europe and be a top 15 athlete. This is no fluke. I think him being 12, and it shows in his confidence. If he believes he's top 15 and it's not a fluke, then who are we to argue?
Well, I'm going to have to argue with Lynn here. How dare you discount Henrik on home turf? Rogue is always his playground. This was his best finish by 3 spots at Rogue. So, this is a renewed version of him. And I think we'll also see a similar thing from Gabby when she eventually comes back, is that the injury that they had to the Achilles forces them. They want to train. They want to be in the gym, and it's going to force them to work on things that you can do with a torn Achilles and when you're recovering from it, which should flex muscles on things like bench press and horizontal pegboard, where you can really lean into the small muscle groups that you're able to build up capacity and stamina with over time. But I was impressed with workout 1, even though it was a 17th, and his run, because those are the things that you would think the Achilles. There was a lot of jumping in workout 1 if you're not sure what the workout was. And I think that after I saw him finish workout 1, I was like, okay, this is a good sign. The next question mark was the duel, where there was dynamic jumping. We did unfortunately see an Achilles go in that workout, but he looked completely fine. And I think that when an athlete says, "I wouldn't show up and compete if I wasn't ready and didn't trust my body," like, we want to take their word for it, but the skeptic in me is like, "Are you sure?" I think he just continued to answer the questions. I think he actually said he was quite pleased with the running workout as well. So I just want to congratulate him. I mentioned it already at some point this past week or two. I know he's put in a ton of work to do it. Probably no one who hasn't had that injury gone back to compete at a high level can fully understand what the rebuild is like there. But Henrik was knocking on the door of podiums in Europe, was potentially in that trajectory to be a champion in Europe, and it seems like he's kind of gotten right back there in 12 months. It's pretty impressive. Bottom of the leaderboard here. This is Guy's worst finish at Rogue. Fabian Hermans out of the Netherlands makes the debut there. BKG, kind of another just bottom of the field finish. Saxon Panchik returns to competition. And then Harry Lightfoot bringing up the rear amongst the guys who didn't withdraw from the competition, but he had one of the best moments of the entire weekend of that group of guys, Wes, is there anyone that you'd like to weigh in on?
I was really impressed with Fabian. I think that everyone kind of saw him as an unknown coming in through the qualifier and being the last person in. I think, especially after that first workout, he almost confirmed that in my mind that I didn't need to worry about him throughout the rest of the weekend, and then he proved me wrong, especially the rest of that day. And then leading into the final day, he had some really good finishes as well. So I think Fabian was really someone that was super impressive. I think anyone would have picked him in that bottom 2 or 3. And I think he showed up and beat some people that we would have definitely expected to do better than him.
Yeah, I mean, beating BKG, Saxon Panchik, and Harry Lightfoot, I think if that was a parlay, no one would have been betting on it. Patrick, bottom of the leaderboard, what jumps out for you?
Kind of add some follow up on Fat Fabian. Obviously, not many people know much about him. I mean, but his best competition in terms of was German Throwdown last year when he finished 3rd behind Moritz and Colin Bossard, and he was leading going into the I think second to last event. So Fabian has a lot of experience. He's just very raw. I had a chance to talk to his coach, Seaman from Krieger, who was here, and he says, yeah, this was a big step for him to come here and see him compete. Now, what that thing to do is now that he knows he can compete with these guys is just, tighten up a lot of his stuff, his training, his weightlifting, some of the skills that he needs to do. But now that he's seen it in person, now we're hoping his confidence adds up to that. So, that was really cool to see him do that. He had a really cool moment again, winning that heat in the second to last. Him going over, seeing his girlfriend. He was just really, really happy, really cool. That's what you want to see. And but besides Fabian, again, I have to talk about Harry. Just that first event, first heat, right off the bat, him going out hot and kind of dying there, but he had the crowd going, and then that event 8 when he finished second and just had the crowd in his hand and started the soccer chants, and it was just cool to see. And we don't have that type of athlete, I think, in our sport anymore. That does that, plays to the crowd. Noah's that guy. Noah was that guy that played to the crowd, had fun. Guy does does that as well. Roman does that as well, but not to the level that Harry was doing it. And I don't know, maybe it was because of the whole crowd, but we need more people like Harry Lightfoot in the sport for it to be more digestible, more fun to watch, because that's what he did. A lot of people will tell you that was the highlight of the weekend, was him doing that, and everyone loved it. And that's what makes sports such a fun thing to do. To watch in person. It's a spectacle. It's something that you're going to be engaged in. I mean, and that's why soccer fans or football fans in Europe, that's why it's such a popular sport. That's why it's the world sport, not, and Harry's that guy. And, we just need more Harry. We need more people like him. And I think he took a lot out of it too. He's very talented, very outgoing. I think Chandler lives maybe about 2 hours away from him. I think they're planning on having some training sessions there, so that'd be kind of cool for Harry to kind of have that training partner, maybe a mentor of sort from someone like Chandler. Currently, he trains with Amy Kringle, but it's fun to watch.
That kind of runs us through a majority of the leaderboard portion of things. Got a few loose ends to tie up here. Patrick, some of the people throughout the show have been asking about Sam Uldis and Emma Tall, the 3 athletes that withdrew. Anything to say about those athletes?
Yeah, obviously Samuel was a full rupture of his Achilles. He kind of knew immediately that when it happened. You've seen the videos on there. Josh Hicks and his team, his medical team, they were on it. I mean, you don't want, those are like the worst people that you want to see during a competition. But I guarantee you, those athletes, when they see them coming to you, that that they're going to be, you're going to be well taken care of. I believe Samuel's going to have surgery sometime this week. The one thing that kind of sucks about Samuel is he kind of like Vellner, he didn't bring his family. He was concentrated on just this event, kind of like what he did at WFP. He's done it a couple times at WFP, so he was kind of all alone. But shout out to the HWPO team that was on site. His coach Josh was able to be there. And we all know Josh is a good guy. That you're going to be alone with, that's a guy you want because he cares so much about his athletes. Speedy recovery. I hate to see it, especially he's one of the nicest guys in the sport. Oldest, I heard it's a calf. He re-aggravated a calf injury. He stuck around. He was at the final, the award ceremony. He was there, hanging out with everyone. So he stuck around. So hopefully it's not that serious. I think if it was serious, he wouldn't have stuck around for the podium. So and then when it came to Emma, Emma, I think she just re-aggravated maybe a shoulder injury, and I think she just, I don't think it's anything serious. And I think she just, she's looking at something further down the season. She obviously went all in with WFP this year, and I think that's what she intends on doing. So, if she kept on continuing, especially at the level of all the stuff you're doing, a lot of picking up from the ground, for a shoulder injury. I mean, I can only imagine like a deadlift, if that's something that's actually bothering her, what that would do. So I think it was more of a cautious thing for her. So those are what I kind of have of the major injuries coming out of there. But I think overall everyone's kind of a little bit beat up, and they're really going to take November off, for those competing in WFP season.
Got a question about the prize purse here, Patrick. Can you stop sharing your screen? I'm going to share something here. See if I can get it. I think Hiller put this up on the video that we did together. But for base show, which position would one have to finish at Rogan to equal earnings for the WFP? The WFP is a little different because there's 3 different tour stops, but this shows the breakdowns of the payouts at the finals for the season-long champion, and it has comparison with the games and Rogue, and then obviously the tour stops for WFP are way over there on the right. But the big difference between these 3 competitions is that the games and Rogue have a very heavy leaning towards first place. 43% at Rogue of the prize purse goes to the first place finisher in both fields, and 50% of the games field goes there. That 50% drops to 10% for the games, drops from 43 to 15 for Rogue. So the winner of WFP does not get nearly as much as the people who win the games in the Rogue for just winning the finals. Now, granted, they'll have also won some prize money at the tour stops to even be in a position to do that. So you can look at someone like James. If he goes second, first, that's $125,000. It's also worth noting that the costs for the athletes are less at WFP finals and Rogue because of the competitions cover travel, and that's obviously a significant amount for some athletes depending on how far they're coming from. To get more to your question, you can look down here. By third place, it's pretty level: 46, 40, and 43, 40, 30, and 32, 20, 25, and 24. The games falls off a little here: 15, 20, and 21, 14, 15, 18, 12, 12, 16. So it's pretty level through these 4 through 10 spots, or 4 through 9 spots. And then Rogue drops to 5,000. The games keeps tapering off by about 1,000 or 2 all the way down. And WFP, one of the perks of WFP is that it pays out more places. So it plays all the way down to the last place at all of their competitions. So there's a visual for those of you that are interested in that. And I think it's a pretty relevant question because, Wes, I mean, one of the things that we've seen the whole year is athletes competing a lot. We've been talking about it, some of them choosing to do less and more than others. And now that people have seen the entirety of this season and they're starting to think about next year, these are real things that athletes are considering. Where can I compete? How much money do I have to spend? How much money can I make? What's the level of the competition going to be, and the likelihood of me being able to win one of these prize purses? You mentioned, I think, that there's some people that they're working full-time jobs and then they're also doing this. There's other people. Patrick talked about Colton Mertens that he's made $20,000 this month just in competition prize money. And if you do a few of those, then you can start to peel away from a full-time job for a year, get more body work, get more sleep, more focus on nutrition, and that might be able to transition into 4 or 5 years. How much do you think, Wes, that athletes are weighing all these factors from a financial perspective, especially at the end of this year, going into next year when there's going to be a lot of opportunities again?
I think every athlete has a very different situation, obviously, and I can't speak to all of them. But I think that the big touch points, I would say, are one, are they working full time? And you have athletes that have been really successful working full time. You look at even like an Emily Rolfe, right, who does have a full time job and has been super successful. And I think that's really cool to see. You have to talk about sponsorships. Athletes with larger followings are going to have larger sponsorships. Previous games finishes, there's so many factors that go into it. So I think it's going to be hard, but I think that something that you look at, and we talked about in regards to James and Jason chasing that games finish. Athletes can either be consistently good or they can be occasionally great. And sometimes that occasional greatness pays more than being consistently good. You look at James's finishes, and I can't do the math on top of my head, but you look at James's finishes this year, and I'm curious how much he made relative to Jason just from winning the games. You could say the same thing of Adler. I think Jeff has probably made more than James has all year just by winning road. And so I think farther down the list that you go, you're going to see that less and less because there's a smaller drop off, obviously, in prize purse. But when you talk about it, you're talking about getting what, 11th, 10th, 11th at Rogue. You're getting, I think 10th still got $5,000. $5,000 with a trip to Scotland is not life-changing money for any of these athletes, right? And that's just the reality of the sport and the world we live in. So until you're really doing well and you're doing those really great finishes, those top 5, top 10 finishes at major competitions, it's really not, in my opinion, it's not worth it to compete as much as a lot of these people are, because they're preventing themselves from doing the training that would be required to make themselves a part of that conversation when it comes to making real money.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a very well you described it well. There's a lot of facets that the athletes need to consider, and the variables will certainly change athlete to athlete. There's also, you mentioned sponsors, but there's, like, from a predictability standpoint for sponsors, they understand what the game season is. So if they want to tie an incentive to the game season, they understand where the athletes are going to compete, twice online, twice in live competition. They understand the general amount of views that those types of streams will get, and how the coverage generally is at those competitions. Rogue, very predictable. If you're a sponsor, you're sponsoring an athlete and you want to tie to a Rogue finish, you have all the data that you need to know what to do. WFP is definitely the wild card. It could be an amazing thing for sponsors. 4 guaranteed stops around the world, different markets, big broadcast production, all this. But we've only had 2 competitions. We haven't even had a full season. Are there going to be changes for next season? So if you're thinking about it from a sponsor's perspective, it's a little bit risky to maybe tie something to something you don't know as much about. Maybe they want to sit back. Let me watch it one more year. Let me see what it looks like in year 3, and maybe we'll put some incentive on that. And if there's, I've heard of, over the history of the sport, sponsors that are paying 1-to-1 prize money. Suddenly, if you have one sponsor that's doing that, or 2 that are paying 50%, a $300,000 check turns into $600,000. That's like, and of course, that's only one person that can get it on each field at a games or at a Rogue. But damn, if you get that, now the next 5 to 10 years, you can make any choices that you want if you're smart with your money. So yeah, it's going to be in a continuously evolving thing. I will just continue to lean back on what I said previously. I think that if you draw a line, call it $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, whatever you want, is like a baseline. The number of athletes who will earn that baseline this year will be more than it's ever been previously. And that's, I think, building in the right direction. I think there was a comment here from T-Bird. I don't know how the WFB will be able to get the elite with a legitimate chance to podium at the games or doing well to do the tour season after the toll took on this season. Yeah, there's definitely some unknowns about what athletes are going to choose to do and why, and how we don't even know what the WFP season looks like next year. We don't know what the prize purse at the games or at semifinals is, if there's going to be any money at semifinals next year looks like. So there's a lot of unknowns in that regard, but there's definitely opportunity out there. So you're going to get a chance to see athletes compete a lot again in 2026.
For a lot of these athletes too, that you're talking about contracts that are several years, and with a CrossFit season that's constantly varied, right? It's part of the sport, it's constantly varied season. Part of the sport is your season's going to change every year. You have some of these contracts based on games finishes and bonuses there, based on podiums at major competitions and bonuses there. For example, this year with weaker fields at Syndicate and NorCal, you have athletes making significantly more money because they podiumed at a Syndicate or a NorCal If you look at 2024 and the athletes that were finishing 9th, 10th at a syndicate, and then you look at the same athletes coming back and finishing on the podium, just because the field was weaker based on the season structure, those athletes could be making, I've heard numbers of 30% more over the course of a year based on that one bonus. Those are huge bonuses and huge into account. So I think a lot of athletes are going to have to do that with the contract they have. And I think that WFP could definitely be an inclusion in another contract. I think it's just going to be a matter of time before we see WFP being included in that. And it'll be based, I think, a lot on WFP final participation results and then how the next season looks.
Well, those athletes that did make some money off the podiums at semifinals this year, it got course corrected. So next year they won't have that, if they finish on, because you have the online qualifier after the in-person semifinals. So, so those people, there's certain athletes out there who, made the games this year that probably are going to have a little bit more difficult time next year because of the field. We talk about that syndicate field from 2 years ago that had, Adler, Dallin, Spray, now granted those guys moved back out west. It's going to be, and then you also, that's going to be another show when we talk about the semifinals, but we also have, we don't know what those semifinals are going to do, if they're going to open it up for everyone, because NorCal was open to everybody, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
NorCal was. I think Torian is gatekeeping it to the region for the most part. I haven't looked into a ton of others. I think French Throwdown will have a more international field. It's gonna vary again, I'm sure. I do think it's the distribution is going to be very interesting to see where people end up going. People that want to qualify earlier might have to go outside of their region to do so. It's the way that the season is set up is like, that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah. But right now, like I'm looking at NorCal and I'm like, oh, wow. You say what you can about the NorCal programming. It was kind of crazy. But if you look at, you're looking at Colton. If they're staying just West Coast, you're looking at Colton, James, Dallin, Justin, just to name a few. Those four guys right there. That's crazy.
Well, as you guys said, we'll have a lot of shows coming up, a lot of opportunity to talk about that. But let's just go around the horn. Final thought on the 2025 Rogue Invitational. Wes, we'll start with you.
I think that excellence is the sum of a lot of small things put together well. And I think that you saw that not only from the athletes that podiumed at Rogue, but you also saw that from Rogue as a competition. Rogue, from the very bottom to the very top, did things right, and they did things well. And I think that's, representative of them as a company. Their everything from their customer service to their equipment to all these things. Rogue does things well. And I think that Rogue will continue to be an incredible competition, not only to watch, but to compete at. And it is, to some people, even more prestigious than something like the games when it comes to just qualifying for the event. I think that you see a lot of athletes that their dream, right, someday is to qualify for the Rogue Invitational. So I think that as long as they maintain that standard and maintain that excellence, that for a long time to come, athletes are going to show up and they're going to be very, very passionate about doing well at the Rogue Invitational.
Well, Patrick, I don't know if you can beat that one-liner from Wes, but having been there for the second year in a row, what are your takeaways year two in Scotland?
It's a standard bearer right now. Dave Castro famously says he doesn't pay attention to other competitions. I don't know how much of that I believe, but if he's not watching this after the fact or listening to feedback, Boz was there. There were some other CrossFit officials there as well. If he's not listening to that feedback, then guess what? His competition is going to be overtaken by a once-a-year competition like Rogue in terms of relevancy. You're already seeing them catch up in prize purse. So, what's next? So if I'm Dave, if I'm any organization, WFP, Will Morad, Roger, Jason from World Fitness Project were here as well. And Katie even said it herself. Katie says she pays attention to what other people are doing. And that's why she's created such an amazing broadcast. That's why she's created such an amazing fan environment. We've all been to vendor villages before, and nothing. You could, during the event, actual final heat of midday of the elites, you could walk that vendor village and it's packed, still packed with people. if you're a vendor, that's what you want, not these long lulls where you're not getting anyone because the event's going on, and just small breaks here and there. Wes, I don't know how many times you get out to Vendor Village. I mean, I know it was just upstairs, but at the games, but it was, compared to past years, it wasn't very good. But Rogue does it. Rogue does it right. They're the standard bearer right now, and other competitions they need to pay attention to that, or they're just going to lose out in this battle of relevancy.
Yeah, both extremely well said, both super valid, and points I would echo. For me, I think the last thing I'll say is, the athletes continue to impress me up and down the leaderboard. I have positive things to say about everyone, but at the end of the day in sports, there's a big difference between doing well and winning. And Jeff Adler and Laura Horvath were the class of the competition this year, 2 times now for Adler, 3 times for Laura. And as much as I love celebrating everyone in the field, I do think the champions deserve that due. And that's what I'd like to close with is congratulations to Jeff and Laura on another fantastic performance at the Rogue Invitational. PC, 2 hours in, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned doing well. Is that like the Bengals? They did well yesterday, but they didn't win. What again? I kind of want to wrap this up. I just hey, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. Obviously, I mean, some amazing games going on in both college and if you're football fans, just come off World Series, NBA season's picking up, NHL season's picking up. I mean, there's a lot of cool. NBA looks exciting this year. I don't know if you guys follow it. I had the chance this year because it was in Halloween was happening here in Scotland. I bought a lot of sports trading cards, like packs of cards, to hand them out to the kids and people out here. And it was really cool sharing that with a lot of the people here that don't get stuff like that, and sharing. There's a lot of NBA fans here in Scotland and in Europe in general. So it was just really cool, and I don't know, I had a lot of fun doing that. And I think that's just kind of one of those things I'd like to do, where I just want to bring joy, bring happiness to other people wherever it's at. And I think that ties in with what we always say and how we end the show is no matter what mood you're at, wherever you're at, it's never too late to just be friendly, our friends.